Tugann sé anna ásta manis, cura chur ribh uachtarán na hÉireann, an túsal Migrant Higgins chun labhartlibh go léir. An tuachtarán.
Geri cor yn geidal sies ys min lam a wycas y gwol a sachtan cwere feliaf tranona. Cwere sio syr y minwr, tiog dres gyda atmosffer na hilsgwylio. Ac os o'r coed y hysio nisyn, o coed sio, coed cwcylwr sio madr le cwrsy'n ni helina mahan hyn ac os ysyn ma fan cael y saifin gyda mil y marca. Agus yn geidal sies rys, wel ta sio tofog da gwhws, tre slim le Theo Dorgan agus le Jim Lambert, agus tre slim let ook dran o hilsgiliach, as an kinne tógog ag an alsgal, lau mór na hérin, karar fól trí kolostan o hilsgiliach Corkig. Gan airi leatis ta súlam gweishe, mar de eisimplar des na dia kinne a togi hu heine sna dini elia san kolosta sna plianta tolia tiacht. It is a very great pleasure to be here, and I want in the first instance to thank Dr. Mihala Amuraku for asking me here, Dr. Michael Murphy for his kind invitation, and to all of you for the welcome you gave Sabina and to myself. I'm very anxious to immediately say, in relation to signing my own poem, it has taken me 22 years. I was originally asked, and with the different appointments due to the time when banks were banks, Theo made arrangements with me to meet him in Grafton Street to go into the vault to sign the poem. But it's one of those occasions where I'm entirely guilty. I just simply forgot. This doesn't mean, of course, that I was disowning the poem, which in its own way, as time will tell, was quite prophetic as to what was about to happen in Ireland. My poem, Jesus Appears at the Port and Dock Sports Site, 1992. Now, would that it had not been such an element of distilled prophecy. The Great Book of Ireland, which I'm honoured to have been a contributor, and a very minor one, is a celebration and an affirmation. It's a celebration of I keep forgetting the figures, but because they are in fact so impressive. The original work of 121 artists, 143 poets, and 9 composers, all gathered together and produced in the period between 1989 and 1991. So that is why I congratulated you, President of the University, for the decision to acquire this book. And I also very sincere in my congratulation of you that it is a university decision to regard as one of the principal assets they have a book that has been made. And I refer to it as a book that has been made because the beautiful work in making the pages, in making the possibility of the print face, and in the arrangement of the vellum itself, and the crafting of the book. It is both a reminder of at a time when, in fact, craft and the aesthetic had not divided from each other, and to the visions that were later there had not happened. It is a time when there was a great wholeness in the act of creativity, in the making of a book. And this book, which was made through the vision of Theo Dorgan and Jean Lambert, that was brought into being, both in terms of the concept itself, in terms of the design, in terms of its delivery, and in terms of its passage through the intricacies of financing and so forth, is a great achievement. The book has travelled a long way from its humble beginnings. And the origin of the book was something important. In that period, at the end of the 80s, it was born out of compassion and solidarity, that the benefits of a book like this, when it went into circulation, would go to assist artists and their families. I sometimes think in the long journey into the modern period in Ireland, when I began myself a long, long time ago in my other life in politics, One of the saddest letters I remember getting is from a poet whose funeral I attended as President of Ireland, telling me that as he would put it at the time, the electric is being cut off. And I remembered the idea of the compassionate and this compassion and solidarity, and these are important words that were there in the envisaging of this book is very, very important. And then it went right through, I think, in terms of the active participation. Now, is féidir le mará go bhfuil ní rather than ní smóg áster am héin of a go lúder filiarta. It is both a great pleasure to always be among the community of poets, but it also, depending as the evening wears on, can be quite dangerous. But I think it is such a wonderful achievement, because after the concept of the book, the next part was, in fact, to get people to give their work. The original conception was that there would be one poem and one painting, that would form a poster, and that poster would go into circulation for the purposes that I have described. But what you now have in this book is an extraordinary work, extraordinary representation of a period in Irish history. 140 poets, 120 artists and 9 composers. I think that the great book as well is where in what I have felt, must say for myself in thinking about it, in holding the image of a book, the making of a book, the making of a poem of a particular time. The combination of composers, 9 composers, a calligrapher, the words flowing together, that it would be in a casket, as it were, made of Irish elm, from a tree planted by Yeats. It's such a beautiful concept. And I would think now, because I'm here in 2013, looking back to what I regard as an unrepresentative decade and a half of the Irish psyche, where the abstraction into what was speculative has in fact turned to ashes as a proposal for living, and with disastrous results for so many people. That before that there was this notion of a collection together of the work of mind and of hand, so that it would be put together in this beautiful book. I think as well, those of us, I have often said how much I have gained myself, and I wanted to say thank you for the company of artists over so many years. If you were in public life, like Sabine and I have been for such a very long time, so many decades, there were times when either through the theatre in Sabine's time or in my own work when I was meeting artists and writers and poets, there was a great lift that I got from it. It was as if this distillation of possibility, that when the words came out in a poem, and a poet would say to you, that's how it came out. It was very important. The worst time in the history of any country is when the language goes flat. It is the most alienating experience to listen to public language at times, which has no moral force in terms of the concepts, or where in fact the language is rather like something that has ceased to be a dance informed by music, but it is just the patter of the pedestrian passage of one dead piece followed by another. Václav Havel was very moved by that very often, and even in his diary before he died, I'm speaking very shortly in Europe, and he looked at the institutional structure, and he compared it with what he had in his mind of a Europe at peace, not only at peace, but a Europe that was releasing all of the creativity of people from diverse sources. And he spoke about words that had what would happen when the words went. So words are important, the poets are important, the composers are important, those who handle and make beautiful books, those who know how to put it all together, those who use their hands and to use their brain, to actually stand back and know that we are making a connection with an old time when there was no distance in between that which was abstract and that which could be, which had a utility through connection to life itself. So I think that the book, therefore, in question, this book as well, it encapsulates a moment in time. It's a kaleidoscopic collection of words and colours that make a pattern of what it meant to be Irish in that time, in a contemporary world that was falling from a version of modernism into a period of consumption and a postmodern flux, but at the same time, those who are writing and contributing, those who are making images, and those who are composing music, who are making celebrating a unity between what was the integrity of memory and the sovereignty of the imagination into the future. I think the work will be a work of beauty and wonder and poignancy beyond nostalgia. I think it what a better fitting way, and I say to you, to have it in this university, and I hope available to the public too, that how to a better way of marking the final days of the 20th century. And it includes the last handwritten poem of Samuel Beckett, one of the greatest Irish writers of that century, when one thinks about that as well. And there are people in this book who are visiting artists. Our Nobel laureate Seamus Heaney is there. Also there are in fact two others as well who went on to be Nobel laureates, who are in the book itself. I think that, you know, when I think of the people who contributed, there are people who were drawing from the migrant experience, that great gift of the migrant experience which Europe has yet to celebrate and place at the centre of its culture. There is the exilic as well. This is where Beckett was relevant, of those who chose to put a distance between themselves and what was intimate so that they could clearly see both the preciousness and the poignancy and the fragility of that which they valued. When Samuel Beckett, in it what is written, I think as well that the last handwritten poem of Samuel Beckett, who wrote, "Redeem the surrogate, good boys. We have no more for the land, the sheet a stream at your hand, and the glass unmisted above your eyes." Capturing a sense of a moment in time, quietly slipping away. And I think that the inclusion of the writers I mentioned, of Beckett as one of the greatest examples of the power of the exilic in, as Yeats would put it, in withering into truth. I think that these writers from beyond the shores also reflect something else that is possible, a kind of cosmopolitanism appropriate to Ireland that is full of ethics rather than voyeurism, a kind of ethical commitment to diversity, a recognition that we are people who have travelled and come home and gone away again, a recognition that we are a migrant people who have been over a long time ago, were Irish Europeans bringing and saving scholarship and loving beauty for its own sake without the stamp of materialism on it. So the book is a very, very good introduction to those who want to think of a time when our minds were truly open, when they were open to the enrichment and influence of other cultures and artistic preferences. So it will remind us too of how much writers and artists and their place in the world. And I think how the importance of universities in the world. It is to universities people turn in broken times, not just for the hackneyed repeat of failed models, but for the possibility of the emergence of new and different versions of a world that is yet waiting to be born. I think that it is important to think about where writers and artists are in all of that. They create something that is maybe beautiful and uplifting, but also, more importantly, helps us understand the complex nature of our world, our place in our world. Or as in Joyce's case, the power of taking that which is most intimate and personal and sensate and putting it out into a world that could only write long narratives and epics out of the experience of empire. I think that universities are important, writers are important, poets are important, composers are important. They are important for enabling us to celebrate what Paul Ricoeur called the politics and ethics of memory. and the freedoms and responsibilities of the imagination, to which we are so dependent on the universities, never to be pedestrian and never to be simply compliant, but allowing us the spaces to allow the young intelligence, the older wisdom to combine together to make new versions of the world. And now more than ever, we can honestly explore and reflect, as I've said, our recent history and move on, transforming it into a new place. Tar sé de bhua galan tóris is scríneúri, trí an lóra agus an iváine éistúile. Go bhfuil sé dábal de fírin an amatá caitse agus na líne se a hairamh gdóin. Fírin í húra muid linn I górain sa tácaí, is éistúlis uhuial iad na deartí agus na mionta trína mréhin an drám éirimúl agus cruach sa leabhún an dá. Ag ní cílíonn sin mar sin féin go bhfuil aspa lúcan ó fírin is an instant omlá. This inter-project is an important project. It allows us to explore the interconnected experience of all those involved in making the great Book of Ireland. I think that it is a great occasion that we are able to celebrate, the work, the delivery into the public world of this vision of Theo Dorgan and Jim Lambert. And I think as well, I'd like to conclude therefore, mar faculty, as con creature college and made it all around. Aurelia Trace Liam Costal and Helskillia Curtig, Asan Kinetatok Aka. On acquiring this great national treasure, President, I congratulate you. I congratulate everyone who has made it possible, including those donors who have enabled the book to come home, as it were, to a place where it will be appreciated in future generations. I think as well, I salute all those, as I've said, I remember in my other life encountering those in pecunious times who happened to be artists. And I recall what it was like to be alive in a state where if you put the word poet, you could, social welfare didn't necessarily recognize it. But I think, I said, and where it was so frequent to hear of artists and those who work in the theatre and elsewhere, but what is your real job? The work of the mind, the work of the soul that is delivered through the mind and through the hands of those who make papers and who make books is all in the great Book of Ireland. I think it is, I want to congratulate very particularly as well then those scholars and to those writers and to those people who have the courage to go on and to create, knowing as I do, in fact, the difficulty that is there and sometimes in the sheer loneliness that is required in the act of creativity itself, but also the unbounded joy that is there when it is delivered and when it is offered to those who share this fragile planet with us. Gramila Mahake, Tristin.
Thank you, President Higgins, for inspiring words that I think will ring in our ears as we proceed with this project and in many other enterprises here, and I think among yourselves as well.